Todavía para compartir este momento de la tarde. Bueno, tal vez me voy a presentar. Yo soy Geneviève Cortés, trabajo en la Universidad de Montpellier en Francia como miembro del proyecto Sala. Lo que le propongo, tal vez, como somos pocos, un turno de mesa muy rápido para que cada uno diga su institución, su función. No sé, Alfonso, puedes tal vez empezar a presentarte rápidamente, ¿no? En algunas palabras, para que no perdamos mucho tiempo.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Alfonso Hinojosa. El micrófono dice.
Perdón.
Te tiras.
A ver, toma el micrófono.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Alfonso Hinojosa, vengo de Bolivia, del posgrado de Desarrollo de la Universidad Mayor de San Andrés de La Paz.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Laura Tomba, soy coordinadora de programas y proyectos de la Organización Internacional para las Migraciones en Buenos Aires.
Hola, estoy Marcia Schenk, estoy haciendo un doctorado en la Universidad de Princeton, Estados Unidos, en Historia, y también en este momento estoy con la IUM en Buenos Aires.
Tengo que presentar no voy a presentar esa mesa redonda, más bien. Esta mesa redonda intenta compartir experiencias y que podamos, lo que no tuvimos el tiempo de hacer esta mañana, poder hacerlo ahora. Que expresemos las preguntas, las dudas, las críticas, las interpretaciones que tenemos con nuestros propios trabajos de campo y cómo podemos aprovechar estos y compartirlos, cruzarles entre todos.
Lucas Luchilo, Centro Rales.
My name is Kingsley Akins from Diaspora Matters, and you heard me speak this morning, but there's more where that came from.
Susana Sassone, soy investigadora de CONICET aquí en Argentina, en Buenos Aires.
Giovanna Tato, Development Center, OECD, Paris.
My name is Elizabeth Thomas Hope. I'm from the University of the West Indies, based in Jamaica, and I work on various aspects of migration and diaspora, especially in relation to the Caribbean.
My name is Javier Verastegui. I'm working for the National Council of Science and Technology and Innovation of Peru.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Creo que es útil que ya tengamos toda una visión del conjunto del grupo. ¿Cómo? No, está aquí el micrófono. Yo lo tengo directamente. Bueno, pero si no me escuchan, hablo más fuerte.
No, era para la traducción.
Bueno, la idea, entonces, como dijo Jean-Baptiste, es un poco resolver las frustraciones del grupo en términos de comentarios, de preguntas, a partir de las presentaciones que tuvimos, tanto ayer como hoy. Yo quisiera tal vez apuntar ya para impulsar la discusión. Creo que ayer tuvimos un día muy interesante, pero que hizo resaltar, me parece, a través del programa de Sala, aspectos ligados con instrumentos, métodos, dispositivos, experiencias concretas que, impulsó el programa. Hoy me parece, esta mañana, que tuvimos un debate, una presentación muy interesante también, pero más del lado de lo político, y me parece que surgió algo de las dificultades, también de los límites que podemos ver surgir de estos dispositivos, o sea, cualquiera de los actores, los niveles, las escalas, y me pareció muy interesante ver la diversidad de las experiencias en relación con este tema de diáspora. Otro tema que me parece que podría ponerse en la mesa en los debates, me parece que los procesos de cambio estructurales o cambio coyunturales, cambio en relación con la crisis, cambio de mirada también que lo vimos en las presentaciones de mañana, puede ser otra pista, ¿no?, de reflexión. Y entonces, y por último, creo que estamos en esta dialéctica de qué está, o sea, pasando en términos de éxito, ¿no?, de las experiencias que se dan en varios países, pero también en términos de dificultades, de límites. Me parece que también podemos profundizar este aspecto. Ahora, no sé cómo organizar las discusiones, pero en el programa tal vez quiero recordar que había algunas preguntas que se han formulado, o sea, no le voy a leer porque son 7, pero seguramente se han leído esas preguntas que nos pueden ayudar a tal vez organizar un poco el debate. Lo que le propongo tal vez para empezar es que tengamos de manera muy libre y muy espontánea algunos complementarios, o sea, elementos complementarios en relación con lo que se presentó esta mañana, porque me parece que no tuvimos mucho tiempo para debatir. Entonces podemos empezar, si ustedes están de acuerdo, con reacciones así muy libres en relación a las presentaciones que tuvimos en la mañana, y después tal vez organizamos el debate a partir de las preguntas que se formularon en el programa. Bueno, entonces les dejo así tener reacciones, comentarios, preguntas, precisiones sobre lo que se presentó esta mañana. No sé quién quiere tal vez. Ayer también, claro, sí, pero no hay problema, es totalmente improvisado, digamos. Es el método constructivista, digamos. A ver, ¿quién quiere tener algunas intervenciones? ¿Sí? ¿Está dónde? ¿Quién da el micrófono?
Yesterday also, we spoke briefly about the importance of sectoral public policies, diaspora and public policies. I think that we have to go deeper in this direction because the impact, the role of diaspora on the public policies and on sectoral policies such as agriculture, health, employment, education. I think it's very important, and I will take the situation also to speak briefly about our project. OECD just launched a new project on interaction between public policies, migration and development. The project is financed by the European Commission, and the purpose is to announce partner countries' capacity to incorporate the migration dimension into their development strategies and public policies. It's very important, I think, and in the same time we speak about developing countries normally, but we have also some country studies, 10 country studies, so we can help us to better understanding this kind of impact. And we have, for example, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and after also African countries, Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Morocco, Jordan, and in Asia, Cambodia, Philippines, and Thailand. So diaspora is one big issue in this project, and we try to analyze and to understand what is the role of diaspora the impact of the decision of diaspora on sectoral policies, and vice versa also. What kind of influence could have some policies, and for example educational policies, on the decision of the diaspora? It's very complex, but we think that is the right direction to better understand the big dynamic of the diaspora.
Muchas gracias. Sí, Jean-Baptiste?
Could you precise a little bit? Yeah. Could you tell us why these countries in Latin America in particular, for one question, and the second is what do you expect? I mean, it's a research with development purposes. Are you supposed to come out with orientations, guidelines, or what
Yes.
kind of outputs for these particular countries do you expect?
We identify these countries. We have different way to identify this country. It was also a matter of immigration and emigration countries, and low income, middle and high income, and we try so to have a heterogeneous group of countries in this way. And it was also this government asked to the OECD and helped to strengthen the capacity building, to integrate, to incorporate migration dimension into their sectoral policies. So we answer also to the necessity to the government.
No sé si hay otra pregunta o reacciones en relación con este programa. ¿Sí?
I think countries are at different stages of development in their relationship with their diaspora, and we have to recognise that. But I think governments have to make a decision. Do they want to make diaspora to front and centre of their approach as a strategy? And very often governments put it on the side, and that's over there. Whereas in fact, to be successful, diaspora has to really intervene in all the different types of government program. So one of the challenges is that you need different diaspora strategies for remittances, philanthropy, trade, investment, art, culture, education, tourism, sport, medicine, and you actually, they're quite different because diasporas are different. And we were chatting at lunch, I think I was saying that I think the interesting thing about diaspora that we learned from the United States, I think diaspora equals alumni. And alumni of universities in the United States are fascinating because they are so loyal and so connected back to their university. And then they interact with them in two different ways. One is what we call the major gift level, where you have a small number of people who are very engaged and very supportive. And then at the mass level, you have huge numbers of people who are involved with the university at very, very modest levels. So you actually need the kind of twin track approach. And it's this challenge between, do you go a mile wide and an inch deep, or do you go an inch wide and a mile deep? And I think to be effective, you need to do both. The other challenge is, what's the role of government? I think the ideal role of government in diaspora is to be facilitators rather than implementers. But the problem is very often the market doesn't deliver the initiatives and the programs. And in the absence of that, the government then has to intervene and really take a very strong role in this. But there are many diasporas who have, for various historic reasons, have a slightly tendentious relationship with governments, we're unsure about them. So last week, I had Northern Ireland 15 members of the Moldovan government. And Moldova is a very interesting case in point. It's 25% of Moldova have left Moldova, but they've only left in the last 15 years. They're huge savers. They save about 43% of their income. There's 5 billion in savings in the Moldovan diaspora. What do they do with that money? Well, they save it in banks in the countries in which they're staying. They get 1 or 2%. Those banks lend the money back to Moldova and get 8 or 9%. So here's an immediate challenge of an obvious financial challenge there. But I do think it's this difficulty of having one size fits all. But it does require at a very top level an acceptance and agreement that diaspora has to be front and center.
Sí, yo quería hacer un comentario a propósito de lo que señalabas. Hablamos bastante de migración y de diáspora, si tenemos claros varios puntos, o por lo menos tenemos claro lo que no tenemos claro. Ahora, a mí me parece todavía más problemático el otro término de la relación, es decir, el desarrollo, donde no solamente en este foro, sino en otros, permanece como implícito o sobreentendido. Y en general, tal vez por deformación profesional, los sobreentendidos de hoy son los acuerdos explícitos de anteayer. Y probablemente en términos de desarrollo también estemos atados a una visión de otras décadas. Yo no sé hoy bien qué quiere decir que estamos entendiendo por desarrollo, por sur, o como quieran llamar. Poner en la categoría sur o subdesarrollo la segunda potencia mundial me parece imposible. Si nosotros vamos a seguir pensando que China forma parte del mismo club que Jamaica, no me parece que... entonces, creo que hay un problema con esto, de una idea todavía de una especie de secuencias de desarrollo en la cual reemplazamos lo que era la transición rural-urbana y la industrialización, que era nota del desarrollo de hace 50 años, por algo más impreciso que llamamos sociedad de conocimiento o lo que fuera. Y si tenemos muchos investigadores y empresarios innovadores, empresas de base tecnológica, estaremos, yo qué sé, no quiero cancelar el debate, por el contrario, quiero introducirlo, pero me da la impresión de que en muchas discusiones de migración y desarrollo, esto del desarrollo queda implícito, insuficientemente definido y a menudo más problemático, por lo menos para mí, que el otro polo.
Sí, yo también comparto esta idea de que hay algunos elementos sobreentendidos, digamos, en estos planteamientos, y que el dejarlo así como que genera muchas lagunas respecto a las posibilidades de avance o de prosperidad de perspectivas como esta del Sala, ¿no? Y aquí hay un otro elemento que también creo que está sobreentendido, que tiene que ver con el rol de los gobiernos, ¿no? Sobre todo referidos a los gobiernos de los lugares de origen. No nos olvidemos que el grueso de estas migraciones, estoy pensando sobre todo en mi país o en los países andinos, Bolivia, yo vengo de Bolivia, estos procesos migratorios, estos procesos de diáspora se han dado a espaldas de los gobiernos, ¿no? Es decir, hoy en día lo que algunas instituciones OIM, entre ellas y otras, tratan de posesionar respecto a lo que es, por ejemplo, la gestión de las migraciones, esa gestión de las migraciones, no nos olvidemos que no solo hoy en día, sino en el pasado, están en manos de las familias, están en manos de los propios migrantes. Y hacia los retornos, España es uno de los mayores ejemplos que estas políticas, en este caso de gobiernos de destino, no tienen impacto, ¿no? Entonces, y en los países de origen, los gobiernos también empiezan sí a mostrar un interés en los últimos 10 años sobre la temática migratoria, sobre la problemática de las diásporas, pero son procesos que se han llevado a cabo a espaldas de los gobiernos, ¿no? Entonces creo que también es importante discutir, reflexionar sobre el rol de los gobiernos, sobre todo, insisto, de los países de origen, ¿no? Respecto a esta problemática mucho más particularizada que la migración calificada.
¿Sí? Pues,
Okay, so now that we're talking about the government's role, I'd like to add one more aspect, because we've been mainly talking about the role of governments of origin countries, but also the country of destination plays a role. For instance, in the case of Germany, we have the Center for International Migration. Also, we have the Alumni-Partei Deutschland, about which we heard this morning already. So these are two initiatives whereby Germany, as the country of destination, is helping to A, connect diasporas of different countries within Germany, and B, has programs which helps to return interested people of different countries to return to their countries of origin if they're interested in also contributing to terms of desarrollo, so of development, that have been laid out between the German government and the country of origin. So it's sort of an active program that does a lot of what we've been talking about, but it's not championed by the country of destination. So that's like a different approach. And so we at the IOM, you have diversity in two more aspects. So you don't tend to speak of the diaspora in singular, but in plural, recognizing that it has many different levels, many different actors, many different interests, etc. And then you also don't only speak to the one side of the chain, so to speak. You don't only speak to the country of origin, but also to the country of destination, so that you have sort of a more diverse field of actors. And I think it's important that we speak about both sides of the story.
Yes, just to comment on the Jamaican experience in relation to the role of government. I take the point of our colleague there that migration and the management of migration and remittances has continued on the basis, at the level of the family for many years. So the government is really trying to catch up, to get into this and to manage what they can, in particular focusing on remittances, because the remittances to Jamaica, which has a very large set of diasporas, is extremely significant. This is, of course, a sign of the low level of economic production. So remittances now contribute in the region of 15% of GDP. So it's a very dangerous situation to be in. However, it means then that the government is very concerned to play a part in managing these sums of these monies, which come now officially, much of it, through the Central Bank of Jamaica. But in such small quantities, as you say, there are a lot of people sending little amounts, and without any predictability as to when and how much what the flows are going to be, and so cannot be used by government for strategic planning and policies. So the government is trying now to move in and manage, I don't like to use the word control, but to manage the remittance aspect of migration, and they're doing this mainly by contact with the associations in the diaspora, and having biannual conferences in Jamaica to which all these people are invited and mobilized, stimulated. The problem is that there are many other factors which contribute to making Jamaica's environment not a particularly attractive environment for investment. A number of social problems, as also its economic problems. So there are many challenges there. I think one of the issues is that the government is focusing too much on remittances, perhaps, rather than focusing more on understanding the nature of the diaspora itself. Now, having said that, there is at present time a process ongoing that is currently taking place of trying to integrate migration into development policy. Now, the development policy is not clearly defined because of its whole ambivalence and ambiguity, and it means different things to different people. Hence the focus, I guess, on remittances, because it's still driven by the economic paradigm of development. But having said that, there are also attempts now, and I've been part of, to some extent, just the producing the data, the evidence-based aspect, to raise the profile of the issues relating to families that are caught up, children in particular, caught up in the more negative aspects of the migration process, despite the fact that they are the recipients of remittances, but the sort of social and psychological fallout of that. So it's a fairly broad-based program, but with obviously the challenges as to what the final objectives are. And also I would like to comment on the paper that was made from Caroline from your department, because I think it raised an interesting aspect about the different spaces that interact. And I think governments sometimes think they're only dealing with one space, and rather than this interaction of different spaces constructed by different groups. And I think that was very informative and sort of explained a lot of the issues and problems that we now face in Jamaica.
Gracias. Susana.
En torno a lo que decían, yo quería señalar que hace 2 días hicimos una reunión con Genoveva y justamente hablamos de inmigración y la crisis y analizamos los documentos de agencias internacionales, donde en una de ellas, en un documento de un organismo de Naciones Unidas, no recuerdo exactamente cuál, pero de 2011, habla y resalta la emergencia de la responsabilidad compartida en los procesos migratorios, donde el país de origen y el país de destino deben actuar. Y esto, como se planteó aquí, es como que me parece interesante resaltar esa visión de estos documentos, porque es algo que parece el camino por el cual hay que transitar, no justamente estar de espaldas, sino trabajar, digamos, aceptando la visibilidad de los procesos migratorios y tomando la responsabilidad cada Estado en lo que le corresponde, ¿no? El de emisión o el de recepción. Y el término de responsabilidad compartida, shared responsibility, me pareció bastante iluminador para lo que necesitamos en estos tiempos de cambio, ¿no? Eso quería señalar.
A couple of points. One about development, and we may have several, plenty of different conceptions of what is development. In fact, what's important is what the actors want to do with it. If they want to implement economic growth, if they want to resolve some kind of health problems, if they want to deal with the social issues in the countries of origin or environmental ones. We have plenty of examples of diaspora contribution to each of these different developmental issues, actually. So what's important is what the country needs and what is expressed by the actors in the country of origin. And it's also dependent on the supply side, the proposals made by the very expatriates to their fellows in the country of origin. For instance, just to give a short example, in Colombia, the diaspora proposed to work on electronics and robotics. There was absolutely no unit dealing with these issues in Colombia at the time. So some people said it was silly to propose this, as it did not fit with any need on the demand side. And actually, it initiated a new process of innovation in the country, completely new, brand new, but useful, because it served to expand the range of activities of the country. So the issue of demand and needs is also quite relative. If there is something given by the diaspora and that it may spur, if it may impulse new development in the country of origin, that's fine, as long as it creates resources, dynamics, processes that are favorable to the country autonomy and projection into globalization. It gives it more assets. So I think it's important to take this into account. It's not a question of supply and demand, fixed, definite supply and demand. It's really a question of processes and interaction between both actors, inside and outside the country. To come back to Jamaica, what I find important with the Jamaican cases, like the worst, the country with the worst brain drain. Like in all these studies made from the late 1990s to the 2010 decades now, Jamaica always appears like the worst country for the expatriation, highly skilled expatriation rates among a couple of Caribbean countries or Central American countries, with 80%, even 90% of their skilled manpower leaving to other countries. And what I would like to know is, seeing this, what is the reaction of the Jamaican government? Because they know the figures, certainly, and if they didn't know, you certainly told them, Elizabeth, as I know you, I'm sure you made them aware that there was a problem here to be dealt with. And how do they react to this? When they see that there are some kind of technical offers, like from the RISES program, it may be the Chilean experience that we saw this morning, this kind of experiences do they think of taking benefit of these, or do they just don't care? When we talk of policy, when there are other options, not that far from the very country, Jamaica, then what happens? Okay? La responsabilidad compartida me parece buenísima la idea, porque eso relaciona con lo que dijo Caroline this morning precisely. These different levels. We have these becas providers, grants, scholarships providers that may be used, that may be on both sides, the country of origin, the destination country, and if they both combine their efforts for tracking the individuals, tapping their skills, then it will be much better than if they do it alone. They can mix their efforts on make synergy. It's certainly very useful. So it's like la responsabilidad compartida, shared responsibility is certainly an excellent way to deal with bilateral commissions to try to maximize the exchanges between both countries through the migrants. Sorry, I've been a bit long.
No, está bien, estamos aquí para... A ver, ¿quién? ¿Sí?
To respond to Jean-Baptiste's question, yes, so the government does know the level of expatriation of high-level tertiary educated persons. Now, of course, just one small caveat, and that is we don't know what percentage of those persons that show up in the OECD censuses actually got their qualifications abroad, right? So, but at least they were potentially high-level personnel anyway. They are aware. It's an interesting thing. On the one hand, yes, there is now the effort to try to have virtual returns, tap into that reservoir abroad. But I noticed that the report of the recent consultations with government ministries indicated they would not encourage the physical return in any large numbers because of the poor economy and therefore the lack of the absorptive capacity of the country. I think they could get around this variously, including encouraging entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. So in other words, the building of jobs rather than simply employing people. But they haven't so far been considering that, but as you say, I will point that out very clearly to them as well. But they, yes, so there is this effort or this rhetoric associated with trying to reach persons abroad without necessarily having them return full-time, but possibly in a circulatory way to do consultations and so on. But I have to say that the local population are a bit resistant to return. For example, a postgraduate, a PhD student of mine had looked at nurses who had gone abroad, and not only from Jamaica but also from some other Caribbean islands. And they were not easily reabsorbed into the system. There was resistance by the local population. But also, just to mention, Jamaica did enter into an arrangement with the IOM for the Return of Talent program in the middle to late 1980s. Yes, Return of Talent. And I actually interviewed virtually all those persons in a small study that I did. And I think it is true, certainly at that point, most of them had continued to stay in Jamaica, but some had gone back at the end of the time, at the end of their contracts. Some had returned, re-migrated. There was a significant re-migration, even although some did remain and were absorbed. But there were some interesting networks that I studied between themselves and the local society and also the society of the country from which they had returned. I don't know if that addresses your issue, Jean-Baptiste.
Just one addition to that. Okay, just one addition. And I give it to just one thing is something that what we proposed through the CDSAL project. Would it be, and how could it be of use for your country? It's very simple.
You mean the network?
The reconnection.
The reconnection.
Through the devices we suggested.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? Does it not? Doesn't it?
Yes, I think it does make sense, although there is currently a project ongoing of trying to build up a database of the diaspora. But as far as I'm aware, it's not using the kind of technical programs that you have spoken, that were referred to yesterday. They're more done through, again, more the contacts and through associations abroad. The other thing that exists in the case of Jamaica, as many other countries, is close contact at the hometown level. And so there are all these smaller networks that are very significant in terms of support and interaction and also information flow. But what the government is concerned about is that these are not coordinated, and possibly if they were coordinated, they might have a greater impact and even motivate others.
Can I just pick up on a couple of those things? On your last point. See, I think diaspora is not about countries, it's about place. And the place may not be a country, it may be a town, a village, a parish, it may be a corporation, or maybe an institution. In fact, the company in the world that does this best, I think, is McKinsey. I don't know if you've ever noticed how McKinsey talk about their alumni around the world. McKinsey have an extraordinary diaspora. They have a whole team of people whose job is to connect with that diaspora all the time. And I think there's some distinct parallels there. But I also think, you know, you're underscoring the intense complexity and sensitivity between people in the diaspora and people in the home country. I always remember meeting a guy when I was in the United States, and he said to me, he said, I wish I was back in Dublin, wishing I was back in Boston. And you know, it kind of sums up this complex thing that's going on in people's heads. You know, to leave a country is a tough thing. But to get up and go, you need to get up and go, so certain types of people do that. But I think there's another element here which we've evolved into in Ireland, which is very simply, don't think, you know, how can the diaspora help you? But think, how can you help the diaspora? Because basically in life, the more you give, the more you get. And if you enter into this relationship from that perspective, I think you'll win out more in the long run. Because you have to go through an intense period of listening to the diaspora. I think the country that's done that in an interesting way is India. Because until the year 2002, India had no relationship with its diaspora. In fact, the only relationship it had was one of distrust and dislike between India and its diaspora, and vice versa. And in 2002, Manmohan Singh was the Minister for Foreign Affairs. He's Prime Minister now. He's an Oxford, Cambridge educated, very Western gentleman. He instigated a high-level commission which spent about a year out in the diaspora listening to what the diaspora had to say. And the diaspora told them, your country is corrupt and it's overly bureaucratic. They had the license Raj system. If you want to import a cup, they have to have a license, which of course led to intense corruption. And they broke down all those things. They listened to the diaspora and they introduced fundamental changes. They also introduced a whole series of, and those of you, I'm sure many of you know about the things that India have done, their OCI, their new passports, and their networks of business, etc. But now there is a sense of global Indianness around the world, which did not exist before. When I grew up, I thought I would have regarded India as poor, impoverished, dirty country. And now I think of India as an incredibly smart, clever country. How do they do all of that? And I think that that relationship with the diaspora and them listening to it was an interesting piece of that. The other thing I do think we have to rethink emigration. And we've often talked today about the circularity, migration, etc. But one thing I don't see countries doing is preparing people before they leave. In other words, saying to people, we could have a role here to help you before you emigrate. We know you're going to emigrate. We're going to help you. We're going to help you in lots of different ways in terms of upskilling you. We're going to help you with your networking opportunities. We're going to keep in touch with you because we know many of you may want to come back, or many of you may want to connect back. But countries don't do that. They don't do it because I think they might be perceived as encouraging immigration, which is kind of like a no-no. But I think that's interesting. If you live in Australia or New Zealand, as a youngster, aged 21, 22, and you finished university, you all go away on what they call walkabout. That's what the Aussies do. They go away for a few years and you see them all around the world. And I had suggested in Ireland we have a concept called workabout, that we encourage our young people to go. We're an island off an island, you know. And who knows Ireland who only Ireland knows is an old expression. So encourage them to go, but to help them before they go, to keep in touch with them when they've gone, and to encourage them to come back if they want to. So I think it is changing that mindset, and it's also applying a process. And the process we applied in lots of different programs actually has 4 phases. It's about research, it's about cultivation, it's about solicitation, and it's about stewardship. And research is really, really important because you need to know who these people are and where they are and what they're doing, and you need to build up information on them. Cultivation is bringing people on a journey where you are listening to them, and you are building that relation. Solicitation is what we call asks and tasks. You actually have to ask people to do stuff because people don't put their hand up and offer to do these things. But if you ask them correctly and properly, with courtesy and humility, people do stuff. And then stewardship is when after people do something for you, it's from the diaspora. It really is, if you like, that after-sales service, because what they're doing is showing, by whatever action they've taken, an interest and concern, compassion in your country, etc. But that should just be the start of a long-term hearts and minds relationship. So there is some process around all this which applies no matter what the field you're in. The same process, I think, applies.
Thank you, yes, because this is why I indicated that I felt the Jamaican government was perhaps too focused on trying to attract investment rather than understanding the diaspora and the processes involved. And having said that, the conference, the biannual conference, is a means of listening to at least some aspects of others. But it's the same issues that you mentioned, that was Indian experience, the over-bureaucratization. So in other words, to set up a business is an impossible task. You lose the wish to do. And also the corruption through the system is a negative factor. So trying to get the focus more on the facilitating environment and also understanding the diaspora are where I see the focus should be. Just right now, anyway. I mean, hopefully we can move on to other things.
I think it's a bit hard to throw. I'm sorry I came halfway through the discussion, but I'd really like to echo some of the points that have already been made by Elizabeth and Kingsley. The International Organization for Migration has assisted many governments, including Jamaica. We've learned from the experiences of Ireland, listened to them very closely, and I think, as outlined in the publication that John Baptiste mentioned, the very first step that we always talk about is building trust with the diaspora. That seems to be lacking with so many governments, not specifically in this region, but at a global level, that the idea that somehow the diaspora is going to be giving something back with nothing in return. I think it comes to a kind of question about what is it that governments are really looking for by creating that trust in the longer term. I mean, what are they looking for? It seems to me that sometimes too much focus is placed directly on very short-term objectives without really seeing what the longer-term potential is of the diasporas and what they can bring. I think it came out peripherally that it really is about human resource planning. And I note the point that Elizabeth made about the need to, or I believe it was Elizabeth, about preparing people before they went. I find that interesting because if you think about labour markets and labour market planning, what you notice that there are often gaps in many countries of origin that end up being filled up by immigrants. So in effect what you have is migrants leaving from the country and other people filling them. Whether that be good or bad, that is a separate discussion, but it seems to me that a lot more could be done to prepare certain cadres of migrants before they left, let them know about what was possible to be offered when they come back. And not only letting them know what would be offered when they come back, but making sure that the types and skills and competencies that they've acquired abroad, if they do decide to come back in a medium and longer term, fit the needs of the labour market. Now, I'm defining that quite narrowly because I understand that we are talking about diasporas also coming back for innovation and creating businesses. But it strikes me from some of the visits that I've had to a couple of countries in this region that there are niches with the growing economies where nationals of these countries could very easily come back and create something new or find a new place of employment, but they're not necessarily recognised. And they're not recognised because they're new areas. And therefore what you have, in essence, is a situation where somebody who wants to come back and contribute may find that they've acquired a new profession abroad, and that would be something that would be of great interest, but they can't, because it's not something that exists in that country. Likewise, with the fact that many migrants do go abroad with degrees and higher education and become underskilled, you therefore have a situation of catch-22, that you go abroad, you don't work in an area where you've got competencies or skills, and you come back with perhaps even less. So it might be a question in the longer term of asking governments about how they foresee their planning, human resource planning, and factoring in migration in the longer term. I don't think there is one specific answer, but I think the question of mainstreaming migration into development planning, which is something that Jamaica is doing, is part of the solution. Now, what does that mean? That means talking about migration as a horizontal element to all policy planning, and making sure that everything from central government and ministerial planning right down to local planning factors this element in. And I think there are a number of countries right now that are going through a mainstreaming exercise at different levels, but it comes back to policy coherence. It comes back to making sure that all levels of government and all different ministries are talking the same tune and are not necessarily talking about different things, be it returning diasporas just for business, or integrating them back into the labour market, or just talking about certain sectorial policies. It has to be a concerted effort across the board to make sure that these policies are across the board are the same. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the, well, a number of challenges in what you say, which I think, one is preparing migrants, which was raised. This is something the Jamaican government is aware of. But there are two problems. One is resources. That's the first big one. The second one is trust. Invariably, people are on the plane before even their neighbors know that they're going anywhere. You don't talk about migrating. That's because partly, I suppose, it's to protect yourself. So if it's all a big failure and a flop, then you had a vacation and you came back or whatever. But so there is a whole culture that relates to a lack of trusting not only the government but society generally in terms of migration activities. The other problem, which is extremely troublesome, is this matter of human resource planning. Because one of the criticisms about our own tertiary institutions is that we are educating people for lack of for non-employment. I mean, last week I saw not in the university I'm at, but in the University in Jamaica, the University of Technology, Jamaica, which is a national institution. They are producing, I think, 150 graduates in business administration at the end of next month. So we are, even without the migration factored in, producing people not for immediate employment demand, or even new niches necessarily. So it's a general problem, not only a migration problem.